And we are live with another episode of Yard Prep here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm your host, Louis Song. I'm joined by Chris Early, otherwise known as Duke. We've got plenty to talk about as the Miami Dolphins young players, and maybe some of the older players too, have their final audition for the final 53-man roster. So we're going to be keeping a very close eye on several of these young players, some of these older players as well. And these guys are going to have to give it everything they've got. They want to be able to prove that they belong on the Miami Dolphins 2024 Super Bowl run. So we got plenty to talk about, but as always, we got to go ahead and mention this show is brought to you by PrizePicks.com. Use the promo code 5, that's F-I-V-E, and when you put in a $5 bet on PrizePicks, they will literally give you $50 of promotional funds for you to do future picks. So it's that easy. Again, these guys let you pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. You don't always have to go NFL. You can do the NBA. You can do the WNBA. You can do the MLB. And college football is returning. And right now they have another promotion going on where if you put in $10 on a college football run, so let's say, for instance, actually, it's even easier than that because all you have to do is just pick one player from any college football team, and then you can have Major League Baseball for the rest of them. All you need is that one college football player, and you can get a free lineup for you to play completely risk-free. So PrizePicks makes it so easy for you to win. Use that promo code 5, and they will give you $50 in promotional funds to play with when you put in a $5 bet. And also, we do have YardPrep, that is also a sponsor of the show and the 5 Reasons Sports Network. So I'll play the video for you, and then we'll get started right after that.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called Jerseys305.com. That's Jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out, Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
And again, that's Jerseys305.com. Use that promo code 5 to get 10% off your order when you go and get whatever memorabilia they actually have on their site. And believe me, folks, there is plenty of it. All right, so we are, of course, still waiting for the official inactives list. We are hearing reports that Liam Eichenberg is lacking any sort of padding. So it sounds like he will not be playing tonight, which, I mean, that just opens up the door for some other young players to make a case for themselves. So what I'm going to go ahead and pull up here, I'm going ahead to check out any recent reports. So far, we haven't gotten anything as of yet. But if there is anybody, like, let's say, for instance, I'll go ahead and ask you this question, Duke. Are there any 2 players that you need to see tonight to help them pull away from the rest of the pack and cement their spot on the roster, in your opinion?
Tough question. Well, one you mentioned with Liam Eichenberg, that was a guy I was kind of hoping would see a little more of, but if he's not playing, that means he's probably kind of locked into a spot.
I felt like we knew that already, though, Duke. I felt like Eichenberg being on the roster was a given. They weren't going to cut him.
I was, I don't know if he's going to start this season, but I'm going to say a couple of guys. I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to say Channing Tindall. He's needs to have a really good game tonight to kind of make the Dolphins think about keeping him around. Right now, I think he's clearly a bubble player, and they've got some guys that they like, and I don't think they're going to keep a great deal of linebackers. They've got their top 3, so I think he needs to have a really good game and show out. On another spot, I'm going to go with Patrick McMorris, rookie. He flashed in the first preseason game. He was a little quieter in the second preseason game. So it's a loaded room, and you can pick any number of cornerbacks, defensive tackles. he's a guy that could cement a roster spot with a really good game tonight, and make them make tough decisions in that secondary room.
Well, we've got Ron Caniff in the chat right now making up Jeff Wilson. So he's somebody that Ron wants to see. I guess he's looking to see him pull away from the likes of Chris Brooks and them. The thing is, though, I feel like in many ways, Jeff Wilson, because this is where I talk about, and I understand I may have used the word wrong, but I'm going to stick with it just because, well, tell you what, I'll use a new word. How about favoritism? There's favoritism with the Miami Dolphins. I feel like Jeff Wilson, to some extent, has a lot of that favoritism locked in for himself. I feel like he's going to make the Dolphins roster. Again, if he suits up today, then I guess that will say that, okay, well, maybe they're looking at him as just, they do need bodies. That's something to keep in mind. They need bodies at running back right now because you know for a fact that Devon Achon's not going to play. You know that Raheem Mostert is not going to play. And you definitely don't want to throw in any of the important players. I'm willing to bet that we will not see Jalen Wright play either. So that means that you have Jeff Wilson, Xander Horvath out of Purdue, a 2-year vet, and Anthony McFarland, because we're assuming Chris Brooks is still out, which makes sense. So that leaves Jeff Wilson, McFarland, and Horvath. It really, there's no way, there's no competition there. McFarland and Horvath, I feel, were brought on just as bodies to fill the spot because the Dolphins need to have some kind of a running back there. You can't throw Jaquan. I can't even remember the guy's name. I'm so sorry. It's
Jaquan Burton.
Jaquan Burton. Yeah, that's the guy's name. It's like the poor guy. Like he went out there and he decided to play running back just to make a point to say that he'll do anything it takes. He's not going to make the roster. He's just not. So very sad. I feel like in Jeff Wilson's case, he's already on the roster. He's already in there.
I would say that it's going to depend for him how he plays on special teams because he's the fourth running back. Unless there's an injury to one of the guys that we just haven't heard about yet. I think Jeff Wilson's running back 4 or 5, depending on where they see Chris Brooks. So he's in that zone. And I don't know that that's a guy that's going to get a lot of carries in the season unless there is a major injury. So if they decide to keep 4 running backs, I think he's going to be on it. And I think Chris Brooks may go on injured reserve or something like that. Or maybe they just see if they can push him through to the practice squad. But I don't know. I agree with Ron. I think he's a bubble player. I think he needs to show that he's not just worth a roster spot, but he's worth getting some playing time in the season. And they may view it that way as say like, all right, we're going to just work Jalen Wright in slowly. I mean, he's a rookie and he flashed in the first game. He's got the speed, but he's still a rookie. And so I think they may view Wilson as like, all right, he's our third running back. We're going to keep Wright around as the fourth running back right now, and then work him in slowly. And then over time, we whittle down Wilson's carries and then let Wright have some carries. So it depends on what they decide to do, but there's a lot of tough decisions. There's probably, I've gone through this offseason and made some 53-man predictions, and I've got it on a paper on my computer. And there's some guys that deserve roster spots that are not going to be on the Dolphins roster. And it's just tough, which is a positive thing. I mean, there were years in the past, Lewis, I know we've talked about it, where we could probably cut to a 43-man roster and still not had a lot of talent on this team. And now we've got guys that are going to be playing for other teams this year. Or going to be on other rosters that the Dolphins just can't fit. So it's good to have that much talent and that kind of depth. So, it depends what they do there. So how they decide to form the roster is going to depend on guys like Jeff Wilson and Tanner Connor and Jody Fortson and some of those interior offensive linemen. Do they want to keep 10 offensive line versus 9 offensive line? The top 4 tackles are on. So you've got, is that 5 to 6 other spots that you're looking at? What about the defensive tackles? What about the edge group? Now we kind of assume, Bradley Chubb will probably start the season on the PUP, so that frees up a roster spot. And I think we kind of know who these guys are, but there's just a lot of things there, and it's going to be interesting to see Tuesday how they decide to get this roster down to 53.
I just realized I was muted. I apologize. So we've got some comments coming in. There are some players that have been released already. Jackson Carman got cut. Is there any interest? So he's a former second-round pick of the Cincinnati Bengals. From what I've been hearing and what the folks in OnlyFans have talked about, by the way, it's only $3 a month to get onto the 3 yards per carry exclusive Discord server where you can get fascinating information that you can't get anywhere else. Carman is worse than Liam Eichenberg. That's what some of the commentary is on that. It's not coming from the official 3 yards guys. They haven't really said much of anything about Mr. Jackson Carman. But if the comparison that we're getting about him is Liam Eichenberg, I'll pass. I will pass very hard.
Well, my thought would be I'm not taking an offensive lineman that's been cut from a team with a potentially worse offensive line or a team that has offensive line issues. Now, if Philadelphia or Detroit or one of the teams that have a really good offensive line and really good offensive line development program, if one of their guys is like, look, we just don't have the room, we're getting a guy cut, sure. I'm not taking anybody from a team with with just as many or more offensive line questions as the Dolphins. So yeah, pass.
Yeah, if you want a good offensive lineman, you find a team with good offensive linemen, and you find one of their cast-offs because they don't have enough room for all the really good ones that they already have. You don't look for a trash team's trash. That's just asking for trouble.
And case in point, look at Jack Driscoll. Comes over from the Eagles as a free agent, a team that's known to have a good offensive line. He never really won a starting spot there, but they've got a lot of talent on the offensive line. And he comes over here, and what does he do in the games? He plays very well. I've seen various people, discuss him, and including our own coach Eric Smith. And his first review of him was that he wasn't very positive on him. And then over the course of the last 2 weeks, if you watch his offensive line grades and reviews, he's been more positive of not Liam Eichenberg, but Jack Driscoll than he was in his initial assessment. So just goes to show, some of these teams, there are teams out there that have extra offensive linemen that they're not going to the need. And maybe he's one of them. So those are the places I would look. Cincinnati, no.
And In-Date is trying to make the argument, is that what happened with Kendall Lamb, who came from, admittedly, I'm actually looking up where Kendall Lamb came from because, honestly, I can't remember where he was from. He was picked up off the streets.
He was he was an undrafted free agent from Appalachian State, went to Houston first, I believe. And then
Houston
went to
was 2015 to 2018. Yeah.
And then he went to Tennessee. And then he
went to Cleveland in 2019, 2020, okay. And then he went to Tennessee.
Okay. I couldn't remember if Cleveland was in there or not. And then he went to the Patriots, I believe. No, he played against
I don't see that on here.
He came from the Titans directly to the Dolphins. He played half a game against the Patriots, was put on IR, and then he was signed back last year. So this is his third season with the Dolphins. So I don't know that he went to a place with offensive line development. I think he's maybe just a good scheme fit here that he wasn't in other places. But
I think the argument that In-Date is making is that Tennessee had a terrible offensive line, and he came from there to Miami, and he's been well.
Well, Tennessee had a bad offensive line last year. If you go back to 2019 when Tannehill got there, and in 2020 when they had the number 1 seed in the AFC, they had a really, really good offensive line. At least started with one. Taylor Lewan had some injury issues for them, and so that kind of lowered their ceiling a little bit. But they had some good offensive lines. It was just over the past couple of years the talent wasn't there. They had the tackle that went to Cleveland. I can't remember his name now. Conklin. They had him at right tackle. Taylor Lewan at left tackle. I mean, that's 2 first-round picks, 2 very good players. They had an offensive guard that went to the Bears last season in free agency, if I remember correctly. There was another guard that a veteran guard, James Brewer. So they had some good talent a few years ago when Lamb was there. It was basically after Lamb left, and then their talent just went downhill. They drafted Isaiah Wilson, and that fell apart. And then just some other picks and lost some talent there. And their offensive line was pretty rough last season. So yeah, I don't think necessarily that one fits, but
it's what happened indeed. It's what happened when you're bargain bin shopping. You cast a wide net. If you're looking on development, then at that point you might as well keep the guys who have already been in the scheme, for real. It's not even just bargain bin shopping anymore. It's if you know for a fact that you already have a team that is struggling to find good offensive line help specifically, and even they decided they don't want him, you might as well go drag Dallas Thomas out of retirement. Maybe Mike McDaniel can make something out of him after all these years. And that's where my mindset is as well.
Mean, look,
I'm not interested.
McDaniel and Barry are great coaches, but they're not miracle workers. So
exactly, like there's only so much that can be done. You actually have to have some level of talent. It just has to be the case. Let's go ahead and let's pivot to, at least I'm going to pivot to defense really quickly. I need to see who's going to stand out above the rest when it comes to these 4 young corners. And this is something we had talked about during Pulse as well. I need to see Isaiah Johnson. I need to see Storm Duck. Apparently Ethan Bonner is back. And we need to see more of Cam Smith. There's 4 guys that may be fighting for a roster spot. Again, if Nick Needham is playing tonight, which I'm going to guess that he will be, I guess we need to see something from him too. That's the thing about corner that specifically you can't help but just kind of overlook. Because the idea of being a corner is that unless you're making some kind of flashy play, you're not supposed to be noticed. You want to be thrown at as the least humanly possible, because that indicates that other teams respect you and say that they don't want the ball in your direction. Do you think anybody, like Jalen Ramsey made a couple of plays last year for Miami when he finally came back? One of them was that incredible interception. Great. Aside from that, we barely noticed Jalen Ramsey. You know why? Because they didn't throw the ball his way. They refused to throw the ball his way. And so with these kids, Storm Duck, Isaiah Johnson, Cam Smith, and Ethan Bonner, one of these guys is going to make the roster. Ron is pointing out in the chat that it's probably going to be Cam Smith who makes the 53. I can't disagree. They've obviously projected him as such, and again, there is some level of favoritism when it comes to these players.
No, well, let's be fair about that. That's not favoritism. He was a 2nd-round pick from last year. That
makes him favoritism because if it's all about the best players, period. If the best players make the team, regardless of whatever the draft status was.
Well, you don't give up on a guy that early. Now, if this was his 3rd year and he's hurt again and other things like that, then it becomes a question. But he's the 51st pick, 53rd pick. He's on the roster. The way I look at the corners, you got basically 4, 1, 2, 3. You got 4 to 5 guys battling for one spot. The top 3 are set with Ramsey, Kohu, and Fuller. There's your top 3. Cam Smith, he's got the draft position. He's going to make the roster. And he's a talented corner, so he's going to make the roster. I think Saron Neal is the 5th guy, and he's going to be there as special teams. And I think he's played well enough this preseason that he's earned that spot. So it's Bonner, Needham, Duck, Isaiah Johnson, Jason Maitre. They're battling for one spot. And who that's going to be, I don't know. I think the kind of odds are leaning toward Ethan Bonner, but and then we'll see. I mean, they might try to do some funny business and put Cam Smith on IR and keep an extra guy and do that so they can and bring him back, in a few weeks. But they might try some of that. But yeah, I think right now it's 5 guys fighting for one spot, and it's a good spot to be in. Talent wise, it's a bad spot to be in if you're one of those players because you've done all you can do and there's just not enough room.
Well, we'll see what ends up happening there. We're going to go ahead and quickly pivot to the usual segment where we go into prize picks. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the screen here. So as is usually the case, once again, as a reminder, we actually do have a $10 promo that you can actually pull up right now. It's not on my screen, but it is for several others, where you can get a free lineup if you put at least $10 on some kind of college football lineup. So all you have to do is pick one of these guys. And by the way, FSU is coming back, and Miami and 5 Reasons Sports does have a lot of FSU coverage as well. So I'm not really sure, I'll be honest with you guys, on who the best choice is. I'm not very good at college football. But with that being said, I'm going to look at these numbers here, and it looks like these guys don't usually hit their numbers. I will go ahead and I'm just going to say that this person is going to, Roydell Williams, or running back out of SFU, he's not going to hit his number. So we'll go from there. Now, as for the actual preseason here, so we've got our list. I see Mike White in here. He's at 97.5 passing yards, and Skylar Thompson is at 87.5. Predictably, both players are playing tonight. Tua is not, to the surprise of absolutely no one. So, Duke, the last couple of games, Skylar Thompson has started the game, and then it has been Mike White for the second half. Mike White, in my opinion, has actually looked better than Skylar in these instances. So I'll ask you, sir, of the two between White and Thompson, who is the one that you feel like would be the safer bet, and in which direction?
I don't know. Looking at both of those, I mean, Thompson has the lower number to hit, and I think he could do that, even though I think Mike White's better. And it depends who starts. If Mike White starts and he's playing with the second and third stringers, he's going to hit his number. If he's in there playing with, the bottom of the roster guys, I mean, he did last week. He did in the week before. I don't know. My hunch is going toward Mike White.
And a Mike White over?
Over, yeah.
All right. So we'll say that Mike White gets at least 100. Basically, he's going to be getting 100 yards passing in this preseason game in the second half, assuming he starts. Now, let's take a look at the receiving yards. So we do have
so before we get into that,
here.
I'm looking on the Twitters. Apparently, Patrick Whitworth has a boot on his right foot.
Uh-oh. Well, so much for that.
So that's as they're saying, that looks like that may be a put on IR and stash move.
Yep, that's what Adam Beasley is saying right now, is that very likely that he just ends up stashed on the IR and says, okay, we'll just hold on to you until next time. So that actually leaves the door open for Nick Needham again.
Yep.
So that's something to keep in mind.
You know these guys are going to pull some funny business. Like some guy's got like a hangnail and he's going on IR. It's just every team does it. So,
well, I would imagine that the Dolphins are already going to be doing it with. There was a couple of players that came to mind.
River Craycraft will be one.
He'll go. Well, yeah, Craycraft designated to return, very likely. There's a distinct possibility that's going to be the case. Let's go ahead and look through this list here, though. So Malik Washington is currently at 26.5 receiving yards. Eric Ezukanma is at 30.5. And we have Julian Hill at 8.5. So here's my wonder. Is Julian Hill even going to play? Because we've already seen him do well. And we've already...
if he plays, I would take the over.
Oh, for sure. If he plays, but that's just it.
I would take the over on Ezukanma. And I don't know about Malik Washington. He gets looks and he just doesn't.
And then
get
he
the
drops
target.
passes.
He just doesn't. He hasn't been seeming to get the targets in this preseason. So now, if it was all-purpose yards, absolutely, he's going to get that on punt returns. But as receiving yards, I would stay away from that one personally. And now that I said that, he's probably going to go for like 150. But I think Asuka plays. If he's not hurt, I've heard that possibly he got dinged up this week. But if he plays,
Asuka is apparently in uniform, so
okay.
he's
So if he plays, he's going over 30 yards.
Yeah, that sounds like
let's be fair. This guy has gotten playing time against NFL starters and has done some things. So if he's playing against other guys, scrubs, yeah, he's getting 30 yards. Washington, I don't know. I just don't see the targets there. Hill, if he plays, yeah, he's getting 15 yards.
Yeah. So let's now take a look at the rushing yards finally. Oh, never mind. They don't even know who the Dolphins are playing at running back, so there's nobody to look at.
Well, there you go.
Well, theoretically, we can expect Jeff Wilson to maybe make an appearance. No, Nick, you know what? Never mind. I take it back. There's no Dolphins running back to even remotely bet on. So
I'm going to say that there are 0 carries for Jaquan Burton this time.
All right. Well, Jaquan Burton is not on the list here, so I'm just going to go ahead and punch in the $10 one here. So that's going to be it for the prize picks portion of all this. Roman Skripuch, I'm very sorry if I end up saying your name wrong. It's he's in the chat saying that we've got to keep Ethan Bonner because, and again, it's very difficult to decide. It really, really is. There's so many good players. So many of them are so important. Ethan Bonner could be something really special, and it would suck to let him go for just because there's just not enough room for it. Ethan Bonner is not injured. He's been practicing this week, and we haven't heard anything about him getting hurt again. So it's not like we can just shove him on the IR and say, "Oh yeah, he stubbed his toe and it's a turf toe, so goodbye."
I think it comes down to who you believe you can squeeze onto your practice squad. If you think that Bonner is going to get poached, but Storm Duck is not, then you keep Ethan Bonner. If you think it's the other way around, then you go the other way around. So, again, that's why these guys make the money, and we sit here and talk about it on the internet, is because they've got to make those tough decisions. So, and we don't know what they look like in camp. All we heard, from what I read was that Skylar Thompson was better than Mike White, and then he plays in the games, and you just don't see it. So, some of these guys might not have the greatest practices, and then they come out in the game and look great. So we know Ethan Bonner was showing out in practice and was getting talked about a lot. So I want to keep him. Look, I'm an advocate for just doing away with roster limits altogether. I read an article many years ago by Greg Easterbrook on ESPN. It was called Tuesday Morning Quarterback was the name of his column. And he wrote an article about how, or inside the article, it's usually like the equivalent of like 10 pages long. It was this huge article, but it's fun to read. And he mentioned that the roster limits were put in place pre-salary cap era to keep rich teams from hoarding the talent over poorer teams. So you couldn't keep 70 players and pay them. Back then you could have done that and paid them all if you had a lot of money, and the poor teams couldn't do that. So they created roster limits. Well, now the salary cap does that. So why do we need roster limits? Keep them all. Make it to where you only count the top 53 against your salary cap. Okay, do whatever you got to do, but there's no reason not to have those guys on the team just because of an outdated thing that was put in there that's no longer valid. So that's my take on it.
All right. By the way, update. Apparently, whoever said that Asuka was dressed, apparently I think they got confused with who it actually was, because Asuka has now been spotted with a boot on his foot, so he is not going to be playing tonight. So I guess do the over on Malik Washington instead. They have to have somebody out there.
This this poses a problem because I don't care what happens tonight, but before we were loaded at wide receiver,
and now we're not.
and now we're not. So do they go out and pick up a guy? I don't think any of the other guys on the roster are rosterable. Maybe Braylon Sanders. I know he got called up a couple seasons ago and got some playing time in the Detroit game. Is he the sixth guy if Ezukama can't, if he has to go on IR as well? And you only get two guys that you can put on IR on Tuesday that you can call up. So if you have to put more than one, only one of those comes back. And if Ezukama and River Craycraft are those guys, but then you have a guy like McMorris or say Cam Smith that has to go on IR on that day, which one of those do you not call up? Ezukama, who you've got an investment in. River Craycraft has had a good camp. Cam Smith, who you've got an investment in. So that is a really bummer of a development, in my opinion. I was hoping to see him tonight, and I maybe it's minor, maybe it's something that he will get over very quickly, but. I mean, the top three receivers are the top three receivers. And I said this on another site a couple earlier last week, I think, that and maybe even on Facebook, that I think sometime around Sunday afternoon, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to come off the PUP. Magically, he's ready to go now. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. But if it is, man, it's going to be Malik Washington's going to get his number called early and often.
All right. We're going to go ahead and call it here. Once again, I've decided that scores for preseason are really that important anyway, so we're just going to go ahead and skip it. In-Day is talking about Kadarius Toney if he gets cut. No. Just hard no. No.
I mean, if you're needing depth.
No.
If he's your fourth guy, who cares?
No. He was the Chiefs' fourth guy. You know what he did? Not much.
He was their number one guy. That was the problem. He was the best receiver they had until Rashee Rice started playing well.
Mm-hmm. How quickly did it take for him to get down the depth chart? Instantaneous.
But I mean, look, they brought in Chase Claypool, and he was essentially the fourth or fifth guy. I mean, it would be the same kind of principle. This is like, all right, we're going to scheme some touches up because you're really fast. We're going to give you one of those Jonnu Smith touch pass things, and you're going to just run.
He still drops.
But I mean, I think there are enough teams with wide receiver issues over Miami that would make a claim for him or try to get him. I mean, if he gets cut and actually goes in the waiver wire, there's no chances the Patriots aren't taking him. Come on now. I don't know who they have on the roster that's worth anything other than the rookies and the rookies. So I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah, there's some guys out there I think they would look at. And there's always the trade for Ayuk thing.
Nah. Alrighty, folks, we're going to go ahead and call it. We will be back here for post game, so make sure you're tuned in for that. We will see you all later on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.